Have you noticed? Haytham Sikri has never talked about any manuscript. Have you noticed? Nobody is talking about any manuscript that belongs to Zayd ibn Thabit. This guy here, everything that al-Bukhari is referring to, why can't we find a manuscript? Listen, therefore, where are they, Muslims? Muslims, I'm asking you, where are those manuscripts? We're looking for 5. Just 5. Because those are the 5s that your traditions tell us existed at the time of 652.
Welcome to Events and History, where we explore the origins, teachings, and historical development of Islam with a fact-based, analytical approach. For centuries, Muslims have been taught that the Quran is the perfectly preserved word of God, unchanged, unaltered, and protected since the time of Muhammad. But what if the very foundations of that claim collapse under the weight of Islamic sources themselves? Join Al-Fadi and Dr. J. Smith as they launch the provocative new series, Why the Quran is False, Meet the Aramaic Proto-Quran. They sift through centuries of scholarship to hunt for the Quran's original prototype. In this eye-opening episode of Why the Quran is False, Al-Fadi and Dr. J. Smith take you deep into early Islamic history, examining the evidence from Muslim scholars and manuscripts that expose the startling origin of the Arabic Quran, from the Syro-Aramaic lectionary. These scholars challenge the textbook story, probing manuscripts, early histories, and contested timelines, and explain why modern academics and classical Islamic narratives don't always line up. Expect clear examples, primary source references, and tough questions about who wrote, compiled, and preserved the text. Whether you're a curious seeker, a student of religion, or deeply invested in Islamic origins, what you're about to see is not from outsiders or critics, but from the heart of Islam's own tradition. Stay with us, because once you see what the sources reveal, the claim of a divinely delivered Quran will never be acceptable again.
Well, hello everyone, this is Al-Fadi, and I want to welcome you back to another episode of this new series on the Aramaic Quran and the search for the prototype of the Quran, or at least the original type or archetype of the Quran. Last time we talked about where the modern scholarship is, and the fact that the modern scholarship on Islamic studies, I should say in Quranic studies and manuscript studies, usually is cornered, because of the reliance or the heavy reliance or even total dependence on the standard Islamic narrative. So today, we are going to address that standard Islamic narrative and what do the Islamic traditions say about the recension or basically the compilation of the Quran. With me here in studio, as always, is Dr. J. Smith. Dr. J, welcome back.
Well, good to be back. I've got my brown on because we are.
And why do you have brown?
Whenever I'm wearing brown, you pretty well know that I'm going to be talking about the Quran. That's my color for the Quran. Right. And we're doing the sifting. We're going to see what is it we have to put into this sifter. Today now we're going to look at what actually the Muslims are telling us. The Van Putens of the world have to keep to this because their paymasters are all Muslims who are giving their money to their not only to their institutions, so they have to know what this is. And I think we need to let the people know, because we're not making this up. This is something that has been around, well, we're going to find at least 1,300 years, maybe 1,200 years, and not 1,400. What is that narrative? So in order to do that, we need to go to our slideshow. So let's go to the slideshow and let's see what Islam says how the Quran began. And to do that, we need to go to Al-Bukhari. Al-Bukhari is the hadith writer who was writing between 850 and 870, the last 20 years of his life. Mm-hmm. He dies in 870, so we know at least by 870 this was written down. And what he says in volume 6, hadith number 509 and hadith number 510. Let's start with hadith number 509, because in hadith number 5, let's look at this, the PowerPoint here, and let's look at the slide. You have the 7th century Qurans. Note which cities and which countries the earliest Qurans came from according to the Islamic tradition. Now, look there, you see Muhammad dies in 632, all right? We're just going to take this is what the standard Islamic narrative tells us. And in the 652 then, you have Uthman, who didn't like the first Quran because the first Quran evidently must have had problems with it. What we do know is by the time 652, 20 years comes later, you have a guy named Udaifa who's up in the north. He's in Azerbaijan and he's fighting the Azerbaijanis. At the end, the other Muslims that come and join him, they come from Syria and they come from Iraq. They go to a mosque. and they go for prayers. And as they're listening to the prayers, which are all Quranic, Udaifa hears other verses that are not from what he had memorized, and he gets upset, and he starts and there's a blow up, and they start punching each other. Well, Udaifa is so upset, he piddles down, back down to Medina, and he goes there into the throne room where Uthman is sitting, and he says, we have got a problem here. We cannot have many Qurans. I've heard many different Qurans being recited in the mosque there. We cannot be like the Christians, have many different Qurans. So we need to bring it to one Quran. And so what does Uthman do? He gets Zayd ibn Thabit. Zayd ibn Thabit is the scribe who is the one that wrote the first Quran for Abu Bakr in 632. He gets him to bring out the copy. One copy was made, and he was given to
Hafsa.
Hafsa, one of the wives of Muhammad.
Right.
And she sticks it under her bed for 20 years, which is rather odd. If it's the only copy, why would you stick it under your bed? Well, that's the problem, because she stuck it under her bed. I'm guessing many other Qurans start proliferating in Iraq and in Syria. And so Uthman says, Zayd, I want you to write it in the Qurayshi dialect. And if you have any disagreement amongst you, how can you have a disagreement? If it's eternal. How can man have disagreements if it's eternal? How can you even hear different Qurans in the mosque up there coming from Syria and Iraq if it's eternal? So obviously there's a problem here. And so he says, write it in the Qurayshi dialect.
To resolve any differences.
And then what does he do? He takes all the differences and he burns them, which means these are written text. This is not orality.
You mean the different copies of that.
That's right, because Muslims always come back to me and they say, this is nothing more than dialectical differences. You cannot have dialectical differences in the 7th century, because in order to have dialectical differences in a written text, you have to have the harakat and you have to have the ijams, which are the dots and the vowels. The dots and the vowels were not there. There were no dots and vowels, as we're going to find out. And we get into that segment in the 7th century. In the 8th and 9th century, yes, but not in the 7th century. So obviously these are razm difference. These are textual. These are really what we're talking about. We're talking about consonantal differences. He burns them, he says that. He just burns them, destroys all that disagree. And then what does he do? Well, let's look now, get the slide, and see what he does. He takes a copy from each one of those, and take a look here. He goes to these 5 cities, Medina, Mecca, Basra, Kufa, and Damascus. So here you have Medina, here you have Mecca. I'll just get you point on me. I'm going to be pointing these out.
This is Mecca, that's Medina.
Yeah, if you could bring back here. There is Medina, which is called Yathrib on this map. It's then turned to Medina later. This is Mecca down here. Over here is Basra. So now these two are in the central part of Arabia. That is called, that is we know as the Hijaz, okay, central part of Arabia. Then you have 3 more that were sent. One was sent up here to Basra, that's Iraq. One was sent to Kufa, that's Iraq, and one was sent to Damascus, that's today Syria.
Yeah.
So 3 in the north, 2 in the middle. Go ahead.
I want to add, this is just one of many stories about how many copies were disseminated. You have a tradition by Ad-Dani, it says 4 plus the Medina. You have one that's talking about 5. You have one that's talking about 7.
Hold on, we're getting to that. Hold on, you're jumping the gun. You're jumping.
Well, what I'm saying is people need to know there is variant.
We're going to get to that next. You're jumping ahead.
We will, but people need to be prepared and ready.
That's coming. That's coming.
Yeah.
That's coming. So these are the 5, right?
Yeah.
That according to Al-Bukhari. I'm still with Al-Bukhari now.
Right.
Okay. Al-Bukhari says there's 5. Now, some people say to every province, that could be 9 provinces. I'm going to go with the 5. Let's help the Muslims out this time, okay? So 5 sent to 5 cities, they're all exactly the same. Am I correct?
That's the idea.
That is what Al-Bukhari tells us.
Right.
In volume chapter
You made
6.
a copy of something. It should be the same.
Now we're into hadith number 510. 5 cities, 3 in the north, 2 in the south. Hold on a minute. Now we're getting to what you're saying. What we do know is that there are some others that start to appear. Let's look at the slide. Go back to the slide again. Yeah. Okay, here we go. Then suddenly you get Ubay ibn Ka'b. That has 116 surahs. And then you have Ibn Masud. Ubay ibn Ka'b suddenly appears in Damascus. It is not the same. It has 160 surahs. How many surahs are there in the Quran?
Well, there's 114.
But here in Damascus, you have one that has 116. That seems to be a different Quran, right?
Yeah, there are 2 different, 2 additional chapters at least that are missing from today's Quran.
And then you have one appearing here in Kufa, or what later becomes Baghdad, and that's by Ibn Masud. He only has 110 surahs. How many surahs are there in the Quran?
114.
That's 4 less, right?
Right.
Then you have Ibn Musa's Quran, which has 114, but it's not the same Quran as Arthur Jeffries found in the 1930s. Just by looking at all the references to these 3, these three in comparison to this one, which is the one that was introduced here and was used in the Hijaz. How many difference? 15,000 differences he found between these three and the one that was here introduced here.
And you mentioned Arthur Jeffrey, and what Jay is referring to, even though it's the same number of surahs, you'll go, and Arthur did an excellent job showing you that the way you read sometimes these passages or verses are different. Wording is different. Structure of the verse sometimes is different. Sometimes there's extra words, sometimes there are missing words.
And where did Arthur Jeffrey get all this from?
Well, he collected it basically by looking at commentaries and looking at other Islamic sources.
So he had no book in front of him.
That's
There
right.
is no Ubay ibn Ka'b's manuscript today.
We're not aware of that.
We don't have anything by Ibn Masud today, do we?
That's right.
We don't have anything by Ibn Musa today, do we?
That's right.
None of these three exist.
And these are the scribes of Muhammad, by the way. Ibn Mas'ud and Ubay. That's what's so damaging about this. These are his scribe.
In fact,
according
isn't
to
there a
tradition.
competition between Ibn Masud and Ubay ibn Ka'b?
That's right.
And doesn't Ibn Masud say, how is it you like Ubay ibn Ka'b? I mean, he was just a teenager when I received 70 of these.
That's right.
And there's this huge contention between them.
Correct.
And there's enormous amount of competition. This is all coming from where? Where are all these stories coming from?
Well, hadith and seerah.
Al-Bukhari, Sahih Muslim.
Right,
These
right.
are all coming from Al-Tabari.
And brother,
9th and 10th century, right?
didn't we just mentioned to people that Zayd ibn Thabit is the one who collected the Quran twice?
Twice, two different times.
And yet he have some differences?
Can you see? Arthur Jeffrey in the 1930s. So this is almost 100 years ago where this has been around. This is nothing new for
Materials for the Quran, I think. The part of the title is the materials.
Now, were you taught this when you were in school?
Oh, of course not.
No.
Now, we're taught about the variant text readings, but the fact that they're all miraculously the same is just, you can read it in a different tongues, if you wish, or different ways, but never think that it's different, actually.
And yet this is he's an Australian scholar in the 1930s, that's 90 years ago, who already, just by using the standard Islamic narrative, he's going to do the SIN, he's going to what they say in the 9th and 10th century,
Right.
and he's finding that they had no problem with this in the 9th and 10th century, that were not just few differences, 15,000 differences from what he could pull out just between these three up here and the one that was down here.
That's right.
Now, I asked you whether or not these three up here, you can't find Ubay ibn Ka'b's or Ibn Masud's or Ibn Musa. You can't find those manuscripts today, right?
That's right. But
What about this one?
we don't have any. I mean,
This is it right here.
The claim is that that's the copy is based on that. That's the claim,
That's the claim, right?
Yeah.
Do we have the manuscripts for this?
Well, remember earlier, I think we mentioned that everybody thought that those early Quranic manuscripts, the 6 that you mentioned, they are Uthmanic, but now everybody...
Do you notice Van Putten never talked about any manuscript? Have you noticed? Haitham Sikri has never talked about any manuscript. Have you noticed nobody is talking about any manuscript that belongs to Zayd ibn Thabit? This guy here, everything that Al-Bukhari is referring to, why can't we find a manuscript? Listen, we're only talking about 1400 years ago. That's not
Right.
very long.
And the scholars usually focus on the 1924 copy.
Oh, did you say 1924?
Yes.
That's only 97 years ago.
Cairo edition, basically.
Or 98 years ago. Can you see? We're talking not even 100 years ago, this was finally chosen. We're going to get to that later, but can you then understand? Nobody can go back to any of these manuscripts. Now, let's look at the New Testament. The New Testament, we have the Sinaiticus, we have the Vaticanus, we have the Alexandrinus. 3 different manuscripts.
At least the complete ones.
Okay, these are the ones, the Sinaiticus is in the British Library, the Alexandrinus is in the British Library. You can go to the Red Black Gallery. I used to go there all the time when I was in London. That's right there in northern London. And you have the Vaticanus, which is in Rome. Those are 3 manuscripts I've given you right now. These are called the Metropolitan manuscripts. The Sinaiticus is early 4th century. The same with the Vaticanus, that's early 4th century. The Alexandrinus is 5th century. If you're talking about 4th century, that's 300 years before the Quran, before this story even comes to existence. How is it we can come up with 3 complete manuscripts in Greek for the New Testament in the same area of the world, because these were all come from this part of the world, the same area of the world? Why can we come up with 3? We can come up with 3 from 300 years earlier, If you want to talk about fragments and other pieces, we have 230 fragments of manuscript that predate the 6th century. That's 100 years before
They
these even
existed at the time of Muhammad, actually.
They all existed at the time of Muhammad because this is 6th century.
And also, an important thing we need to point out, Jay, when we talk about textual criticism of the Bible, we don't say, oh, every copy going to be exactly identical in every letter, jot, and tittle, and everything else. We talk about the message is preserved. The message is still the same. And we have no problem if you point out to me, oh, earlier manuscript has this word this way, or it's
Hold
okay.
on, we're going to get to that. That's another episode yet to come. You like to jump ahead. I'm not right there yet. I still just want to talk about the manuscript evidence, not about the preservation. That's yet to come. So just the manuscript evidence. Can you see there are all kinds of holes already? Can you see as we're sifting and putting what they claim, this is what they claim. Can you see we're already finding holes that in that narrative that we're going to have to throw that material out. This is why it's important that people realize that when you hear the Van Putens of the world, or the Haydn Sikis, or all the other people who are trying to apologize, be apologetic for the Muslims, when you ask them deeper questions, when you do a deeper dive of going right back to the 7th century, you've got some real problems here with these manuscripts. These just don't exist. And the one that should exist, if there were 5 copies sent to 5 cities, how come they can't even come up with one? Just one is what I'd like to see. One from the 7th century. When we're asked the same thing, we can come up with 3 complete copies from the 4th century, 300 years, and we come up with 230 fragments. And that's what we're going to look at next.
Right.
Because the next episode, Muslims are listening to us, and they are struggling with this. And they realize that this is a real problem, because we're only talking about 1,400 years ago. We're not talking about 2,000 years ago when Jesus lived. We're talking about only 1,400 years ago. And remember, everything about the New Testament was all of them was written on papyrus, which disintegrates within 100 years.
Right.
None of these were written on papyrus. These were all written on vellum. They were all written on parchment. That means animal skins. Why? Because these were written by Uthman. Uthman was a caliph. He controlled all the way from here all the way over to Tripoli, from Afghanistan to Tripoli. Well, maybe not quite that much. He controlled at least this whole part of the world. He was rich. He was wealthy. He was sending his soldiers up to fight against the Azerbaijanis. Can you see? He had an enormous amount of money. He was not at all dependent on papyrus. None of these manuscripts that we are looking at, the Topkapi, the Samarkand, the Ma'il, the Petropolitanus, none of these, the Sana manuscript, they are all written on parchment, which means already we're talking about completely different genre. The manuscripts for the Quran are written on parchment, which is as good, not as good today.
Like the one you're wearing.
This is what I'm talking about. We're talking about animal skin, and a lot of times it's deer skin and gazelle. This is goat skin, and it could be goat skin. These last for hundreds, even thousands of years. That's why the Sinaiticus, the Alexandrinus, the the Vaticanus are all written on parchment. By the 4th century, when you had Constantine, who was emperor, became a Christian, he commissioned these, and that's why he could do so, because he was rich. Right. He was wealthy. So be careful. Muslims are going to say you don't have the same thing. The reason why is because at the very beginning they only wrote on papyrus. That disintegrates. They don't have that excuse. They were all written on parchment. They were all written on vellum. Therefore, where are they, Muslims? Muslims, I'm asking you, where are those manuscripts? We're looking for 5. Just 5. Because those are the 5s that your traditions tell us existed at the time of 652.
You're being generous, actually. I'm asking just for 2, identical.
Oh, I'd like to see 1.
Yeah, just exactly. Even 1 dates to the 7th century. So next time we're going to talk about the so-called the 63 fragments, and I'm not going to really spill the beans here about what that means. We will unpack it next time. So thank you so much, as always. Thank you, everyone, for watching. Hopefully, you are enjoying this series. And as I said, the ride is going to be rough, and it might get even rougher. But we're doing it really for the purpose of helping you, our viewers, and especially our Muslim friends, to give you enough information, give you enough data that you can take and you can examine for yourself. By the way, everything these days is available for you online, and you can even go to some of these libraries yourself and take a look at it. So if you don't believe us, don't take our words for it. Go and do your research yourself. Until next time, have a blessed day.
What we've uncovered today challenges one of the most sacred assumptions in Islam, the idea that the Quran was divinely revealed and preserved. What began as a simple introduction has already opened a door that few dare to enter. As Al-Fadi and Dr. J. Smith have shown, the history of the Quran isn't as uniform or unquestioned as tradition often claims. From conflicting manuscripts to the testimonies of early imams, the evidence tells a very different story. Early manuscripts, linguistic shifts, and historical silences all suggest that the text's formation was a long and complicated journey. If the foundation of divine revelation is cracked, what does that mean for everything built upon it? Join us in the next episode as we go even deeper into the origins of the Quran and the men who shaped it. Truth is worth seeking, wherever it leads. This series will trace that path with academic rigor. The deeper we look, the clearer the real story becomes. Stay with us as we uncover more layers of the Aramaic Proto-Quran, where history, language, and belief converge in startling and thought-provoking ways. Like and share this video so others can see it. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications for more Islamic history content. We'll get to the root of this, and find out what the standard Islamic narrative on the Islamic Awareness website is hiding regarding the origin of Islam. Jesus is Lord.